notation and why should you be using it? Today I'm going to run through 3 of the main ways of notating what you have on your pan and why it's helpful. Writing out the letters is really useful if you need to speak to someone else. If you're playing with somebody else, saying I'm playing a D minor chord is really handy information. They can play the same thing on their instrument or sing along with it. However, if you want to go beyond that and start to play on different pans, it's useful to understand what the harmony is. The relationships between those harmony numbers will be the same. So start trying to think in harmony as well as thinking in letters. I just like to know where the notes are on my pan. So using notation, a physical visual aid is really helpful. Where do I put my hand to hit that D chord? Up here. Where do I put my hand to put that chord 5, that A chord? Where do I put my hand to put my chord 6? And where to put my chord 7? A lot of people are familiar with the notes on their specific pan. So you may know that this is a D, this is an F, this is an A. As you look around the instrument, this is a D chord for me. And that's a really great place to start. It means that you know what note it is. If you're working with someone else and they ask you to play a D, you know how to play a D. That's really, really handy because it means that anyone with those notes on their instrument can play it. The pros of that is you look and you see it. We all know our alphabets. It means that you can look down and instantly understand it. However, I find a wall of letters with sharps and flats on sometimes can be overwhelming, which I guess is the con of writing it down as letters. It's also not very adaptive. when you come to a different handpan, unless you have perfect pitch, which I don't, you won't know what each note is just by playing it. Another method is to use pictures or drawing. So I've designed a notation. It's a circle, like a handpan, and then we just count upwards. Dot in the middle. I find that that's really useful for scrolling out notes quickly. If you've got more notes than this many, there's some variations I've created, but for most of my students, that's a really handy way of showing. I find it's quick and easy to jot down. Instead of using letter names on my pan, I tend to use a numbering system. Now these numbers may not be the numbers you're used to, which count up from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Instead, I use numbers related to their harmony. That makes sense to me because it means every time I hear a number 1, it sounds like home. That is the beginning of that key, that is the first chord in that scale. It means every time I hear and play a number 5, wherever it is on my pan, different on different pans, I know the function of that harmony. I know that it's going to sound like that. I've got a D curve, which is one of the pans in a natural minor scale. All natural minor scales sound like this. See if you can sing that. Whether our starting note is a D, a C, an E, we can count off of that. We know the intervals between are always going to sound like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all of them there have taken my letter names, written them out, and assigned them to numbers. If you know what type of a scale you have, then you'll know exactly the way that scale is going to sound. But if you don't, just play them in order, your letter names, and listen to that scale. Any other pan that's in the same scale will use the exact same numbering. The difference, that interval between your first note and your fourth note, will sound the same on any other pan that's based off of the same scale. Whether it uses a D, an E, or an F, or anything for the centre note. And I think that that view of harmony is really, really handy. You may want to write out your tunes or your chords in harmony using these numbers. I find that's really helpful. So that's 3 different ways of notating your handpan. None of them is the best way, but why don't you have a go at all 3 of them? Take your handpan or a big piece of paper. Work out the pitches of every single note and write them around in a circle. Next, write those pitches out alphabetically. If there's sharps and flats in there, don't worry about it. But starting with the ding, in most cases, that would be your 1, your number 1 note. Once you've got them in alphabetical order, number them from 1 and upwards. If you don't have one of the letters of that alphabet on your pan, leave a gap for that. So even if you don't have a B or a B flat or any kind of B on your pan, still leave that gap there where that number of the alphabet would go. Now you can understand a little bit more about your harmony. You'll know whether you have some major chords or minor chords, and there's loads more information about that on my channel if that means nothing. That's a really nice way of understanding numbering, and it means that you can play a scale. Not a scale from low to high, but a scale in the alphabet. And those numbers mean that you can combine them really easily because you know that the number 1, 3 and 5 is going to go well together, and I've already spoken about that on a different video. Once you've got your notes, write down your numbers, and then finally you can draw out some of those notation shapes, which means at a glance you can find your chords. That's the way that I find my notation really useful. Let me know if that's helpful for you, or if you use something completely different, or if you think notation is useless, then that's totally fine too. I wouldn't tend to read from it in a performance normally, but it's really handy for me to understand a bit more about my pan or to remember ideas. I hope that's helpful. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for a new video every week.